Hello, my name is Sanko Lewis, and I'm greeting you from Seoul, South Korea. The title of my presentation is Promoting Peace, Practicing War, Mohism's Resolution of the Paradoxical Ethics of War and Self-Defense in East Asian Martial Arts. I'm going to talk about a concept which I term the martial arts paradox, which is something we find in East Asian traditional martial arts. Thereafter, I will explain why this paradox exists and also how people have attempted to resolve the paradox, attempts that I think actually failed and did not solve the paradox. Finally, I will propose that Mohism is a philosophy that we can source from to solve this paradox within East Asian martial arts. Let me explain what I mean by this idea of martial arts paradox. It is very common to hear instructors of East Asian martial arts admonish their students not to fight, or assert that the highest goal of the martial arts is achieved when not fighting, when not using violence, or even claim that the martial arts can be a means towards peace, even world peace. Yet the very activity of martial art training is to practice and drill techniques that are intrinsically violent and potentially deadly. Martial arts seem to counsel against the use of violence on the one hand, yet actively teach physical methods of violence on the other hand, in a sense promoting peace but practicing war. I use the term martial arts paradox to refer to this internal conflict between the teaching of peace and non-violence and the practice of war techniques, i.e. martial skills or martial arts. Before explaining where the martial arts paradox comes from, it is useful to give a cursory overview of the East Asian philosophies as they pertain to martial arts. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list of all the East Asian philosophies, only the primary ones. Starting with the three pillars of traditional Chinese philosophy, which are Daoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. The martial arts paradox is in essence a result of these three main philosophies. However, there were also other important traditional philosophies such as legalism and Mohism. Although legalism and Mohism are philosophies that are closely tied to military practice, they are ironically almost never or even never referenced in connection with traditional martial arts as we know them today. Legalism was a very pro-war philosophy. Mohism also made allowance for military practice, and we will talk more about Mohism later. Zen or Zen Buddhism is a type of philosophy that grew out of Taoism and Buddhism. The mixture of Zen Buddhism with Confucianism and Shinto, the native religion of Japan, was the underpinning for Bushido, the way of the samurai in Japan. East Asian traditional martial arts often base their teachings, especially their ethical teachings, on Taoist, Buddhist, Confucianist, and Zen or Bushido practices. Daoism can be considered a mostly pacifist philosophy. Consider the following quotations from the Tao Te Ching, which according to legend was written by Lao Tzu. There is no glory in victory, and to glorify it despite this, is to exalt the killing of men. I dare not advance an inch, but retreat a foot instead. When victorious in war, one should observe the rites of mourning. The military is a tool of misfortune. Those who possess the Tao avoid it. Taoist teaching is generally pacifistic. It speaks very strongly against military force, which it seems to allow very reluctantly, while advocating a principle of non-engagement. Confucianism can also be considered a mostly pacifist philosophy. Confucius, who many consider the founder of Confucianism, although he would have disagreed to that statement, is especially known for his silver rule: never impose on others what you would choose for yourself. The application is that if you don't want others to be violent towards you, you shouldn't do violent acts towards them. Here are some other quotes by Mencius, after Confucius, probably the most famous of the Confucian philosophers. There are men who say, I am skillful at marshalling troops, I am skillful at conducting a battle. They are great criminals. There are no righteous wars. Hostile states do not correct one another. Buddhism is also usually considered a pacifist religion. The Eightfold Path and the Five Precepts says that one should act rightly and not kill. Furthermore, the Brahmanet Sutra, which is a famous text used within Chinese Buddhism, states the following: a disciple of the Buddha shall not himself kill, encourage others to kill by expedient means, praise killing, rejoice at witnessing killing, or kill through incantation or deviant means. He must not create the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of killing, and shall not intentionally kill a living creature. While these teachings seem quite clear, Buddhist involvement in war and martial arts by both lay Buddhists and Buddhist clergy is a historical fact. Nevertheless, the core doctrines suggest non-violence. The reason for the martial arts paradox is because traditional East Asian martial arts generally base their ethical teachings on the three pillars, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, which are mostly pacifist, or otherwise looks down on martial practices. This caused an internal conflict between the doxy or teaching of the traditional martial arts and their praxis, the practice of martial techniques. Traditional East Asian martial arts have attempted to resolve this paradox in two ways. The first is to suggest that martial arts are not really about violence or violent techniques. Rather, it is about Budo or self-cultivation. The idea is that the martial art movements are used as a discipline of sorts to cultivate the person. Such self-cultivation can be achieved through many types of disciplines. One can do yoga, for instance, or the tea ceremony. The martial arts are therefore just another method or discipline to walk this path towards self-cultivation. The other attempt at resolving the martial arts paradox is to suggest that martial arts are not really about violence, they are simply sports, albeit combat sports. I think that neither the Budo or self-cultivation route or the sport route resolves the paradox. Rather, they are simply teleological shifts. In other words, they just change the goal of the martial art. In the one case, they don't view martial arts as an activity involving violence, but as an activity towards self-cultivation. Or, in the other case, again, martial arts are not primarily an activity that contains violence, but it is a sport. Not a war, but a game. And practitioners don't practice for fighting, but practice for playing. Rather than taking the self-cultivation of Budo and the sport route to try and resolve the martial arts paradox, I propose that the Chinese philosophy of Mohism can be used instead. Mohism is largely based on the teachings of Mozi, collected in the text by the same name, Mozi. As a philosophy, it was associated with artisans, merchants, and military engineers, and maybe even the knights errant. The core teaching of Mohism is universal mutual love and interacting for mutual benefit. The Mohists were logicians and utilitarians. The Mohists valued the utility of soldiers and the military and martial arts. This is quite different from Daoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, which often looked down on martial practices. The Mohists differentiated between three types of war: offensive wars, which the Mohists categorically denounced; punitive wars, which they permitted but only upon meeting practically impossible criteria; and defensive wars, that was allowed but only under certain circumstances. With offensive wars, we mean attacking another state for profit or expanding one's glory or territory. Punitive wars suggest punishing another state for things they have done wrong, and defensive wars is protecting one's own state when it is being attacked by an offensive state. The Maoists believed in defensive wars, however, they always first tried diplomacy. If that didn't work, they would go on to defend the weaker state against an offending bigger state. Mohism's very strong stance against offensive wars flowed out of their fundamental doctrine of universal love. Also derived from the universal love principle is a duty to protect the weak and innocent. Both the avoidance of aggressive offensive war and the engagement in protective defensive war is motivated by the same principle of universal love. To quote one of the foremost scholars on Mohism, Chris Fraser, Mohists seem to have concluded that, since social order was a paramount value and gratuitous warfare was wrong, they had a duty to assist victims of aggression. Some Mohists became specialists in defensive warfare, rushing to the aid of cities and states under attack. Likewise, traditional martial arts in the form of civilian defense arts, which are mostly practiced today, can also justify their training and conditional use of violence for the purpose of protecting innocent victims from attackers. A Mohist approach to martial arts is derived from the virtue of universal love and mutual benefit, that implies a duty to care for others and so protect them from harm. In order to fulfill this duty, one ought to also protect oneself against harm. Thus, self-defense is derived from the obligation to other defense. This duty to protect others also justifies the time, effort, and resources invested in practicing and teaching martial arts, especially martial arts for self-defense. The paradox of promoting peace while practicing war techniques has caused internal discord for many moral people interested in martial arts. It is impossible to know how many people with an interest in martial arts never took up martial arts practice or ceased their martial arts journey because of an inability to reconcile the practice of violence techniques with personal moral conviction. From personal experience and conversations with many current and former martial artists, this conflict has been a cause of unease for many. It is my hope that this presentation may offer a solution to those people who have a love of the East Asian martial arts, but also question their participation in an activity based on martial, that is, war and violent techniques. A Mohist view of martial arts consider it in the same light as first aid. One does not learn first aid, such as CPR, with the hopes of ever having to use it. However, with it, one may be equipped to save a life when circumstances require such skills. It may even be argued that it is the duty of every morally responsible person to study first aid in order to come to the aid of a person in an emergency situation. Similarly, morally responsible people may also consider it a duty to care and protect, physically if necessary, victims of violence. It is such a Mohist-inspired ethic that I propose with this presentation. I suggest that just as traditional East Asian martial arts has included concepts from different other philosophies, they should do the same with Mohism. For instance, many traditional martial arts have gained a cosmology of the Tao or yin-yang from Daoism, including ki cultivation exercises, and in modern parlance we may talk about mind-body or embodiment practices. From Confucianism, martial arts has gained concepts of respect, ritual, and the importance of self-development. From Zen Buddhism, the master-disciple relationship and the value of experiential knowledge. From Bushido, the idea that martial arts can be a discipline for self-cultivation. And also, from Mohism, we can learn that one has a duty to love and therefore protect others. This legitimizes martial arts training, in fact the training of violence, for self-defense and for other defense. I will end with a quotation from Mozi. In times of peace, give thought to danger. In times of danger, give thought to peace. Thank you.